So I love sci-fi fantasy stories, both live action and animated in film and TV, and those really inspire me a lot in my creative process, especially when I'm creating artwork for personal projects. And creating fan art has been really helpful for me to decompress and also try my hand at creating mini adaptations of those different properties and bounce different ideas off the wall, see what sticks, as I try different visual and narrative themes in the artwork and see what can maybe be implemented in my personal work. And that's a process I haven't really shared a lot here, so I wanted to dive into some specific projects and talk about what influenced them, what the ideas were for making them, and also just kind of the process and the style behind them. My background is in photo manipulation, which I got started in like over 6 years ago at this point, so a lot has changed since then, but when I decided to jump into digital art last year, it was important for me to retain as much of the style that I cultivated for myself. My style is heavily rooted in hyper-realistic settings and bringing fantastical and magical elements to create these really exciting environments. Bringing 2D drawings into the mix really changed a lot of the flow. Just that simple change really kind of infused the images with new life, and it's so in line with the vision that I'm aiming for. Doing fan art has really helped me guide that as I've been developing this new art style for myself that's blending the old and the new for me. Projects like the Voltron fan art that I did were really helpful in guiding that vision and shaping it in an early stage. And I still feel like I'm in such an early stage, but I mean, that was like super early, and I was really trying to figure out what I was going for. But it felt like a cool challenge to attempt to draw Voltron, something that doesn't really have a lot of photo references online. So I was really I was in so much trouble, and I was pulling my hair out. Ultimately, I was aiming to bring that sort of animated type of feel of Voltron into reality and create almost a live action translation and adaptation of Voltron, where it would be weird to see what Voltron would look like in the city. What that would look like in a cinematic sense was something that really fascinated me and a huge influence on the project. It was one of the most complex things I could have attempted at that stage. It's why I haven't done it again, but ultimately it was such a great learning experience because through rendering the sketch and then blocking out the colors and things, I was really learning how to get familiar with shading and texturing and stuff like that, blending some of the photo manipulation tricks that I had picked up across all these years and integrating that as seamlessly into the process as I could without compromising anything in the image. Fan art for me always starts with story and how the narrative will shape the visual tone and atmosphere of the project. Just because I have a lot of different ideas for the different things that I love and things that I would like to see, things that could be cool, and I treat them all as mini personal adaptation. I like to just pretend that I'm creating a story for it that is being greenlit and that is moving into the stage of visual development and seeing where that takes me. This particularly was fun with the Zelda fan art that I did, where I imagined what that world of Hyrule would look like after the games. Years, like talking centuries after the games, and how the events of those games would really shape the legacy of that world. And I created this character that is the Queen of Hyrule that may or may not be related to anyone important in those games, and what she would be going through as the queen, and the queen of a broken kingdom that really can't step out of the shadow of its pretty scarred past. Because I mean, when you're playing those games, it's so much fun. Like, you always want these battles, you want these exciting moments, but when you really think about it, those events, if they happened, would really just tear apart the legacy of that kingdom if the root causes were never really dealt with. And in one of the images, she's fighting her best friend, who is inspired by Marin's design. Her best friend is legitimately clashing with her because she doesn't think that her friend is a good queen, and she doesn't think that her friend has done a great job at leading the kingdom, and they have a severe disagreement that is causing a lot of issues. Because, I mean, when you're talking about these giant characters, these looming legends, right? Naturally, like, who believes in those legends? What do they mean? Do they define the future of that world? And how do those characters deal with picking up the pieces? If they can't really escape the past and that past continues to haunt them because the decisions made by their predecessors didn't really do the best job of maybe guiding the kingdom forward. It's an idea, it's kind of tragic, but if you ask me, given the nature of what happens in those games, I don't think it's super far-fetched. And when you're talking about the prospect of creating an actual adaptation of Zelda, I don't think it's very easy because it's so beloved, right? So everyone has an opinion of what to do with that, and you can really tick a lot of people off if you do something just slightly different or slightly off, people will attack, right? So when I was thinking of a hypothetical adaptation, I was thinking of going far into the future to maybe get away from the specifics of the Zelda story, but still honor the legacy and create almost a commentary on the games and what kinds of implications those stories would have on a real world that had to deal with those very real events. It was just something that was kind of fascinating to me because the more I thought about that idea, it just kept bouncing in my head. One of my favorite elements of the image is the broken Hylian shield. I love the Hylian shield as much as anyone else. I wouldn't want it to be destroyed, but you have to break the thing in order to remake the thing, right? Whenever you see these like precious relics and you see them like torn apart, sometimes it can just be a cool design choice, but also it can sometimes say a lot about the state of affairs and the setting and what needs to be done to repair that. Something I've been saying lately is rule breaking is world building. And when you're talking about creating these different themes and these ideas, what can happen is you start running into rules, especially with something like Zelda. So when you break those rules, what can happen is you can clearly establish the atmosphere and elements of that world and create weight in that world that will clearly correlate with the character and progression of the emotion and the narrative and the themes within that story. It's a way of reverse engineering it to establish what those rules are and why those rules are in place. What do those rules say about the characters and about the world that they inhabit? Next, we have Dora the Explorer, which is weird. I did not plan on doing anything Dora related at all. I don't really know how this came to be, but I got the idea of like what it would be like to see Dora 20 years later. Especially when that trailer came out for the movie and stuff, I was like, what would be going on with Dora as an adult? Like, what would she be like? It's 20 years later, and she is one of the best explorers out there. And definitely you can think in the vein of Uncharted, Tomb Raider, Indiana Jones, stuff like that as a baseline, but this person isn't treasure hunting and this person isn't raiding places that she shouldn't be raiding. She finds these spatial anomalies that are essentially legendary places and locations and environments that no one can really prove exists. I came up with this backstory for her that suggests that in her college years, she had to kind of give up the exploring and she kind of had to go and get this kind of normal job after graduating just because her parents weren't really cool with her exploits as the exploring just kept ramping up and kept getting more and more dangerous. If this was like a show or something, I imagined the opening sequence being this really cool James Bond type sequence where she's running around this really exciting place and it's really intense and maybe there's some people chasing her, and then it's just intercut with a boring office job. It just keeps going back and forth. She's gonna have these two sides of her pulling at each other. She wants to pursue exploring, something that makes her feel as young as she did when she started, but at the same time, she doesn't want to throw herself into danger, but she kind of loves doing that. The visual tone was something that was pretty moody, different than the traditional look for Dora, but I felt like creating a look similar to this could ground that world in an interesting way, so that when you have those weird elements going on and you have those weird locations that she's stumbling upon that shouldn't exist, it's not too wacky and you can really understand the weight that it poses on Dora and maybe different people that she's exploring with. There's more that I have to say about 20-year-old Dora and her friends and her story, but that's going to take some more fan art for me to develop before I can really, put that out there, but it's just an idea. Then we have some Star Wars fan art that I did, and Star Wars is like my favorite thing. I'm pretty sure I've said this somewhere, but if I haven't, if you don't know that, Star Wars is my favorite thing. And I really love the Clone Wars series, so I really wanted to make a fan concept for it, especially after we have the announcement, which I knew was coming. See this, I knew this was coming on Twitter. I'm good with market trends like this. I can predict when certain things happen in the market. I knew Clone Wars was going to come back. It did, and Siege of Mandalore. This is something I've been waiting for so long. That idea of Ahsoka Tano and Darth Maul, two people that they're not supposed to be here, okay? Like, Ahsoka's not supposed to be around because she wasn't really an original creation of those movies, but she's not supposed to be here. And Darth Maul was killed off in episode 1, and then he's back, so he's not supposed to be here either. And this creates a weird destiny for the two of them where they are fated to face each other in a climactic battle that no one's gonna know about because there are other things going on. You've got the events of Order 66 that are just about to happen. They are imminent, and Ahsoka like left the Order. Spoilers, Clone Wars spoilers. She left the Order, so like, why is she here? And because we know that in season 7 we're gonna see their duel, and we're gonna see that sequence in all of its Star Warsy glory, it's tough to create fan art for that because I don't have as much creative freedom in that zone. So this is a good challenge for me to really adopt someone else's vision and adhere to it as closely as I can. And because I don't know what the duel looks like, I wanted to use this as the perspective and the guiding force behind. There's dust happening. I wanted to incorporate that into the visual perspective of the image. And whenever I'm working on an image, I think of the canvas as a camera, and I like to position the camera in certain ways so that I can craft a scene that makes sense to me in my head. I don't know, I just kind of think like that. And so I position the camera, so to speak, in a weird way where you can only see their reflection and you see their legs and you know that they're dueling, but you don't see them. And this is a way to show like you don't know what they're really thinking or what they're saying because we don't know. Like we've only seen like a few seconds of their duel in the trailer. Using that as the cadence for the atmosphere and the ambiance was something that I felt would make sense just to create that desire to want to see more and to want to know, because that's where I'm at. Like, I want to know what happens. I want to know what happens in that duel. So less is more, I felt like, and showing an angle that sort of obstructs the perspective that we want to see and what we are expecting to happen. It was an intentional decision to match the mood of not knowing what that duel is like, and ultimately that's the tough thing because their mindset is very much like that reflection. It's messy, you don't really know what's going to happen, you just know it's happening, and that's all there is to it. The visual technique I used is this thing I like to call dual reflects, which is where I'll show a reflection from a different perspective than just a symmetrical one. That way it just creates a more engaging and dynamic image overall. It took forever because it took me rendering those characters that are standing, and then I had to recreate them in the mirror image and then obstruct that reflection. And it's tough because all the detail that went into making the reflection just ends up getting kind of washed out just by the effect of turning it into an actual reflection. It took forever, and then I ended up making a poster of it so that I had to reformat that to create the cinematic aspect ratio version. And it took a while. I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't exactly the most fun. I was pretty frustrated by the final day. That was definitely where my mind was at, but looking back on it, yeah, I like it. I think it turned out all right. I also have more Star Wars fan art behind the scenes to share, but I'm not talking about that here just because it needs to be its own video because it's a whole idea, so I'll be covering that in a separate video. But yeah, ultimately my approach is think of a cool backstory or concept and explore that as much as I can, as limited as I am since I'm still learning a lot. I've only been doing the digital drawing stuff for about a year, and it's really kicking my butt just because it's really hard. It's harder than I think people make it seem, but I really have a lot to share and a lot of different ideas that I want to make real, and ultimately the end result is much more important to me than the grueling process of getting there. So I'm gonna do whatever I need to do to continue to make my creative vision a reality in any way I need to. Exploring those stories and those possibilities, breaking those rules and trying these different things and putting things together, sandwiching things together that don't really seem like they're the most fitting pair, and to see how the material that I'm incorporating into the artwork meshes with that overall vision. It's an interesting process, and it's something that I'm going to continue to tackle more as I start to really go hard in on fan art over the rest of the year with a lot of the projects that I'm trying to tackle. So we'll see what happens, but hopefully that gives you an idea of my fan art making process and the headspace that I'm in when doing this stuff and some of those ideas. But yeah, that's pretty much it for now. So thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys later.